Hello and welcome to this short masterclass on planning and managing change. My name is Sarah Brooks. What we're going to cover during this session, first of all, establishing why change needs to happen in the first place. How to conduct a business analysis that will help you to identify potential changes that might be required. We're going to have a brief look at the psychology that happens when change is happening and how that links to the various different types of change and the level of resistance that you might encounter. Look at some models that help us think about how we manage people through a change process. And finally, a short look at some models for continuous improvement. So let's begin with why we need change at all. Well, if we don't change, the world around us will, and we fall behind. So this graph that's in front of you, called the product life cycle graph, illustrates very nicely that every product, every service, every technology, and every process has its life cycle. Sooner or later, it will become obsolete. So one of the best ways to illustrate this is to think about the way that we listen to music. I am of an age where, when I was growing up as a child, the only ways to listen to music were either through the radio, which you couldn't dictate what was going to be played to you, or by purchasing vinyl records, albums and singles, and then you could play what you wanted. And then a friend of mine, when we were in our teenage years, came to me and said, I'm going to buy a CD player. And I said, oh yeah, what's one of them then? And he said, oh, it's the new technology, it's digital, it's like magic. He said, it's perfect music. And it's these little silver discs that are played with a laser. And I thought, oh, that'll never catch on. Anyway, it did. And sometime later, I invested in the new technology. I brought myself a CD player and then set about developing my collection of CDs. There was a short interim period where something called a mini disc came on the scene. That went through its life cycle fairly quickly and dropped off the end. And then we saw the emergence of MP3 players. These tiny little devices on which you could store thousands of songs. You could put whatever you wanted on there, but you had to have the digital file to put it there in the first place, which was that was challenging for my brain to think about. And I can remember the first appearance of the iPod and how magical that was. Then we started listening to music on our phones, and now we have smart speakers. I've only got to say her name and shout up any song in the world that I want her to play, and magically it appears in my living room. We stream music. So this is the current situation. Where is it going next? Heaven only knows. Actually, at the moment, we've got the records back out of the loft and we're playing our vinyl because it's gone a bit retro and things have come full circle. But if you were an organisation that created music and sold it in the CD format and you had never moved on from that, you still did that, then your business would probably be obsolete by now. So what we need is a constant stream of new innovation, new ways of doing things, coming off the production line or out of our brains or into our working practices, that makes sure that we are current, and if not, at least on the curve, possibly ahead of the curve, leading the way forwards. There will be new technologies to support the way that you work coming out on a constant basis. We need to regularly review our working practices to make sure that they are efficient and effective, because if our competitors have better working practices than we do, they can produce swifter, more efficiently, more effectively and cheaper than we can, and we will fall behind. And if we're not offering the latest in products and services to meet the needs of our customers, then our business will slow and eventually cease to exist. So what's the role of the leader in all of this? As leaders, we should be looking to the future. What is the direction of travel? We've got a lot to think about when we're leaders, but our thinking should be aligned with the direction of the organisation. So that's what sits in the middle. What is the organisational vision, strategy, and direction? Once we know that, then we can make sure that our area of the business, our department, is aligned with that, and that we are driving our operation forward to support the organisational direction. So that requires a few things. First of all, business as usual, the day-to-day functional aspects of doing your job. But you will also have some projects that are currently being implemented. Now, these are things that you thought about some time ago. You identified as, oh, we need to embrace that new system, that new technology. So let's bring it in, let's train everybody, and then let's implement it. And that's what we would call a current project. And that's for something that we'd already identified needed to be implemented. But what about the horizon? Where are we going at some point in the future? And what shape do we need to be to meet the needs of the future? And that's what we call architecture. Building for the future. What shape, size, structure, resources do we need to have to make sure that we are still sustainable and current? To do all of that, we need to engage. First of all, we need to engage with our team. If you bring your team into the change process, they're the ones with the ideas. They're the ones that work with this on a day-to-day basis and see the problems. You also get their buy-in because it will be their ideas that you are including in the change for the future. So internal engagement with the team first. Then we need to engage across the organisation to make sure that what we're doing is aligned with all of the other departments and we're all moving in the same direction. And also we need to engage with the wider world, the outside world, people who work in the same field as you. What's going on? What's happening in the marketplace? What's happening in the future? So we can use the power of everybody's brain to think, where are we going next? How are we going to drive things forward? This great quote from Warren Bennis: the manager accepts the status quo, the leader challenges it. Just because we've always done it that way doesn't mean that's the way we've always got to do it. Let's think, let's grow. And none of us have got a crystal ball. We can't predict what's round the corner, but we can have a go. And to do that, we conduct a regular business analysis. And I'm going to show you two tools that are there to support you in that thought process. And I would advise that if you're going to conduct a business analysis, a SWOT analysis, bring the team in, get their ideas. It's a snapshot of where we are currently. So we start with the two top ones, the strengths and the weaknesses. Now, these tend to be internal and therefore controllable by you. Strengths. What are you good at? What are the outstanding resources that you have? What are your specialisms? What area of expertise and knowledge? What great client bases have you got? What good relationships? What good systems and procedures? What's working well? If you can identify all of those, that gives us a good summary of the strengths that we have. The opposite of that are the things that are letting us down. These are the holes, the gaps, the issues, the things that slow you down. What are your weaknesses? Are we too small, so we haven't got enough resources? Or are we too big that we can't move very quickly, we can't turn very quickly? Are our decision-making processes too lengthy? Are our processes antiquated? Have we got old technology? I don't know. These are conversations. These are idea generating sessions. So if you can summarize your strengths and your weaknesses, these are all controllable by you because they're internal. And if we know what they are, then we can do something about them. Then we go to the outside world. These are the opportunities and the threats. So this is what's going on in the external environment that may have a positive or negative impact on the way that you work. And to explore that in more detail, I'm going to show you the next model, which is called a PESTLE analysis. So this is an exploration into what is going on in the external environment that may have some kind of impact on what we do. And it's asking questions of what's happening politically. Is there a general election coming up? Are we going to see a change of leadership? Are there some key manifesto themes that are going to impact on our area of the marketplace? If so, what are they? And how do we need to react and respond? Is that an opportunity that we could grab, or is it something that potentially could threaten the way that we do business? Or do we just have to realign our processes to make sure that we are there and meeting those political changes as they happen? Environmental. What's happening about your sustainability, about becoming green, about becoming net zero? What are the requirements placed on your business to reduce your emissions? So what's happening in the external environment there that might impact on the way that you work, the way that you do business? Socially, what's happening socially across the world? We've been through a number of changes recently that means that workflow, people getting resources from other countries is more difficult. So there are new processes and systems in place if you want to employ people from abroad. There's less social movement. What's happening socially around us in our communities that we may want to take advantage of or we may need to guard against. New technology. Is the way that we work too antiquated, too old? Are we using old kit? Are we behind the curve with everybody else? Are we not taking advantage of the new technology? Do we even know that it's there? Legally, what legislative changes? New pieces of legislation often impact on the way that we work, and we need to become compliant with it. So you might need to rewrite your processes and systems. And then what's happening in the economy? Is it going through a downturn, an upturn? Are we seeing huge inflation? Are we seeing mortgage rates, interest rates going up or down? How is that going to impact on the business? So an analysis of this can create ideas. And through all of this, what you should be able to do, if you've analysed your organisation, your business thoroughly, is to identify potential changes that might be required to ensure that you stay on the leading edge and you don't start to fall behind. So from that SWOT analysis, you can look at your strengths and you can say, could we make more of these? So if we're really strong with these products in this market, could we sell those products to slightly different markets, or could we sell slightly different products to our really strong customers? Maximize what we're good at, make more of it. That's what we call organic growth. The weaknesses that we've got, the holes that we need to plug. So do we need to do some problem solving activities to try and overcome some of the hurdles and obstacles that are getting in the way of the smooth running of our business? Are there some changes that we could make that would really iron things out and make it a lot easier to work? Opportunities. What's going on in the outside world that we could take advantage of? Or that flip side of that, what's going on in the outside world that we need to potentially guard against? Sometimes we need to think a little bit beyond the norm. Try to predict the unpredictable and ask the questions. What if it breaks? How can we begin to imagine the unimaginable? Some while ago, a client of mine was targeted by a cyber attack. They weren't expecting this. They didn't see it coming. And it broke. It broke the business for significant period of time because they couldn't communicate internally or externally. Nobody knew what was in anybody's diaries. They couldn't send information. All of their systems were reliant on an electronic system, and it broke because of a cyber attack, and they didn't see it coming. They've guarded against it now, and they've put an awful lot in place to prevent it from happening again. But that was unpredictable, and it broke the system. The unimaginable, we've recently been through a global pandemic. We could not imagine that happening. And we very swiftly changed the way that we worked, probably more quickly than we would have done had we not had a pandemic. And the unimaginable was very quickly realized because we had to change our systems and procedures. These unimaginable events can lead us to great innovations to move us forwards. We have gone from a small, localized, national business to offering global training because of the power of the internet and using recorded systems like this. So what could potentially be a threat could become an opportunity if you take advantage of it and use that to drive your business forwards. However, whenever change is announced, people will react and respond to that. And you will, because you're working with human beings, experience some degree of resistance. The degree of resistance is often determined by what type of change it is. So let's go through these 4 different types of change in order and start on the left-hand side with the one that tends to have the lowest resistance to it, and that is organic change. Organic change are small, incremental little steps that happen gradually over a period of time. And we don't necessarily notice that they're happening. One of the easiest ways to give you an example of this is to think about the aging process. You wake up in the morning and you get ready and you look in the mirror and you don't necessarily notice the latest wrinkle or the grey hair that's appeared. But if you look at a photograph of yourself 5 years ago and you look and you think, oh, if only I'd realised how beautiful I was 5 years ago and taken the most of that. The changes happen so slowly you don't notice until you look back and see how far you've come. And that's what organic change is. And because it's happening slowly and we don't need to maybe ask for more budget or ask for permission or move things around massively, you tend to get lower degrees of resistance to that. So the more you can include organic change, the more you will consistently move forwards and you will experience lower levels of resistance from your teams to that. So organic change means that you can make it happen more smoothly. Planned change. As a result of doing your business analysis and identifying the potential changes, you might put a plan together that says, right, we need to move forwards. We need to significantly change the way that we work. So we might need to get some new budgets. We may need some training. We might need some new equipment or technology. We're doing this because we can see the benefits that we're going to get in the future, but we've got quite a lot of work to do to get there. And that's all part of the planning process. A good example of this in your day-to-day world is if you were to move house. You can see that you want more space, a nicer view, bigger garden, more bedrooms, fewer bedrooms, less space, depending what you want to achieve. But there's benefit to it. But to get there, you've got to pack everything up. You've got to consult with solicitors. You've got to change your address. You've got to move everything around. You've got to get to the other place. You've got to unpack. You've got to settle in. It's an upheaval, but you're doing it for good reasons, for good benefit. So that's planned change. And we often resist that because we've got to go through all of that before we can get to the nice space. It's hard work. So there will be some degrees of resistance to that. Reactive change. This is change where somebody else has made a decision beyond your control, and you have to change the way that you work to align with that decision. So legislative changes are often good examples of reactive change, where a new piece of legislation comes out and you need to make sure that you are compliant with that. What you put in place is up to you. You have control of it. You can implement it in your own timescales, and you can create your vision of what it needs to look like as long as it's compliant. So you have some degree of control with reactive. We really got to do this? Don't necessarily want to. It wasn't your decision in the first place. So you do get resistance to that because it's work that we didn't want to have to do, but we have to react. The final type of change, this is enforced change. You are given a new set of circumstances. There is no consultation. You haven't been included in the decision-making process, and what it looks like is somebody else's decision, not yours. You have to just live with the new circumstances. And that brings with it the greatest degree of resistance, enforced change. Not my decision, don't want to do it. Underpinning all of this is our personal reaction to change, and we all sit somewhere different on this change scale. At the left-hand side, we have got people who actively don't do change. They will avoid any kind of change in their lives at any cost. So these tend to be people who like routine, people who are habitual. What they want is for tomorrow, next week, and next year to be exactly the same as yesterday, last week, and last year. They will probably work in a very similar role, possibly even within the same organisation for much of their lives. They won't move jobs, they won't job hop, they will stay very static. They might make small steps forwards or sideways, but they do tend to stay in roles for quite a long time. They definitely won't move house because that's a huge change. They'd prefer to stay where they are. Maybe go to the same place on holiday every year, bring the same flavour sandwiches to work every day. That's the kind of behaviour we see at the extreme end of don't do change. And if you ask that person to move their desk 3 inches, they're going to fall apart. They will not react well to that change. So negative behaviours will start to emerge. They will become resistant to that change. At the opposite end of the scale, we have people who make change happen. If tomorrow is the same as yesterday, they're already bored. They want a constant stream of new challenges. And if it's not changing, then they'll make it a change. So they will move jobs, they'll job hop, they'll move sideways, upwards, and then they'll move on somewhere else. They don't tend to stay in jobs for more than about 18 months, 2 years. They will move house, they will change the house that they're in. If they can't move, they'll move things around, they'll redecorate, never go to the same place on holiday, and always looking for something new and challenging. They tend to have fewer negative behaviours, but get frustrated with people who aren't as far along the change scale as them if they don't embrace the change, and that can create conflict. And you, as a manager, have to manage all of that as you're pushing changes that are required through your team to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the future. And really, we need everybody along that scale. We need people that can do the business as usual and are happy to maintain the status quo and to keep things working. And we need people with new ideas that are driving everything forwards. And then we need people that are going to implement that. So we need people all along this scale to make the business work. If we only had people who were looking at change all the time, business as usual wouldn't get done. And if we only had people who could do the status quo, then we'd never move forwards. So we need a good combination of both. Whenever change is announced, this is the process that people go through. Their initial reaction, shock. When change is announced, the first process that goes through people's minds, the first thoughts are, what about me? How is that going to impact on me? And it could be just a simple change of the way that we process. Oh, I like the way I do it now. I'm comfortable with it. I'm fast and efficient. I know the answers to all the questions. And now I've got to learn a whole new thing. Oh, it's a shock. It could be something as big as we are restructuring the organisation and some people might lose their job. We may be making people redundant. So it can be from a very small change to a very big one, but it doesn't matter how big it is. People will still think, first of all, what about me? The denial is the thought process that says, if I don't engage in this process, it won't happen. I can dig my heels in and put the brakes on. I can stop it from happening. And the frustration happens when they realize that they can't stop it from happening. Depression bit happens when you are in the throes of trying to get to grips with the new world, and it's hard. And you just want to go back to your old ways of doing things. And that's when we hit the rock bottom. But give it a few more tries and have a play around with it and experiment. And eventually you might think, oh, actually, this could be quite good. And that's when we get to acceptance. And then we practice using it enough, and then it is fully integrated. If we were to introduce a new piece of technology and take it through this process, once we've got to the point of integration, if you then say, do you want your old way of doing it back? And they go, no, I like this way. It's much quicker. I've got used to it now. And to go back actually would have to unpick the brain, and that would be a change. So once we get to integration stage, that means that we've accepted it. It is the new norm. It's the new way of doing things. So to illustrate that process, a little activity that you could do now, if you grab yourself a piece of paper and a pen and you sign your name, and you sign your name 10 times. And we're used to doing that. We sign our name all the time on documents, checks. We don't do checks anymore. We've moved on from that. We've changed. We do internet banking. But we sign our name a lot. So we do it often. It's muscle memory. We're used to doing it. So sign your name 10 times. And then when you've done that, put your pen in the other hand and try again to sign your name 10 times using a new piece of kit. How difficult is that? It's very frustrating. All you want to do is put the pen back in the other hand, because that's how we're used to doing it. But we can retrain ourselves. We can start to use our opposite hand. We can become fluent in that if we practice it enough. If you are leading and managing teams through change processes, this model that's in front of us here matches the change process that we just looked at, but it gives us some strategies to think about so that we can support our teams through those change processes, minimize any resistance or disruption that we might experience, and get to the point of acceptance and integration as smoothly as possible. So let's look at each stage. The announcement. To create alignment with the change that we are proposing, we need to explain the benefits. What helps reduce resistance even more is if you can create alignment by including or consulting with your team members during those initial stages. And if they feel as though they've got a voice and they are part of the process, then they are more likely to be aligned with it, less likely to resist it. Maximize communication as early as you possibly can. Honest, frequent updates and communications so that people don't feel left in the dark. That is what will create frustration if people don't know what's happening to them, don't know what the outcome's going to be. The question, what if, is the downward spiral their brains will go through, and their answers are always worse than the reality. So communicate with them, honest, information as frequently as you can. To bring people on board, bring people together, spark motivation. When they are in those early stages of looking at the changes that are going to be required, bring people together, work as part of a team, work collaboratively, and make it feel like a support network. Develop capability through training and make sure the training is aligned with the capabilities of the team, and that you don't just throw it at them and expect them to be able to do it. So give them the necessary support that they need so that they can experiment and find their way around it and eventually get used to it. So give them time to practice so that you can achieve that integration as soon as possible. You can create what we call change champions. People who might be your biggest resistors, but if you train them first and you get them to train everybody else, they will be your biggest salespeople as far as this new change is concerned. And that will also minimize any resistance and disruption. So the principles of change management: communicate with your team and provide them with honest and accurate information as early and as often as you are able to do. If you can, include your team members in the change process and consult with them to get their ideas about the best ways forward. They will have a greater degree of buy-in and commitment to the change, and therefore less likely to try and put the brakes on, try and stop it from happening. One of the ways in which this has been embraced over the last few years is through the concept of continuous improvement. And there have been a number of different models based around continuous improvement that have been introduced. It started with the Toyota car manufacturing plant, who developed a system called lean manufacturing. So they were moving over to automation, but people still worked on the shop floor. And what they took was the people who worked with those automated processes and asked them to look at the way things worked and to look for better ways of doing things, to iron out the crinkles, to get rid of the glitches in the system. They're the ones working with it. So these are the people that can see what needs to be fixed and how we can improve things. And by doing it from within the team, rather than enforcing it on the team, you get much better buy-in, and it happens more organically over a period of time. That is the underpinning concept of continuous improvement, is organic change on a consistent basis. So we never have to make great leaps forward because we're doing it all the time. Falling out of that came a principle called business improvement technique. So it moved it away from the manufacturing base. So business improvement techniques can be applied in any industry, any process, any system. And you break down the way that you work and you find better ways of doing it going forwards. And it uses some of these other models. The 5S is a really good way of just really housekeeping. Let's organize. Let's put things in the right order. Let's make sure everything's clean and tidy. We know where it is. Let's put some standardized processes in place. Now let's put some maintenance and some sustainable processes in place. So this is just about getting your housekeeping sorted. It's a very simple way of changing things, but very simply with little or no cost and improving efficiency. Six Sigma and Kaizen are models. You can go on the training courses for these, you can bring experts, you can bring consultants in, and you can establish continuous improvement processes within your organization and within your teams. So go and have a look at them, research them, find out what's going on there and see what you could do within your operation to go more organic, to go more, let's do little and often. And let's keep it going. Let's sustain it over a long period of time so that we are constantly moving forwards. And that's what continuous improvement does. So a little recap. We started out by establishing why we need to change. If we don't, we will become obsolete. To identify where we might need to go in the future, we conduct a business analysis, a SWOT analysis and a PESTLE analysis. And that will help us to identify changes that we might need to make to the operation so that we can meet the needs of the future. We've had a look at the psychology that happens during change and the process that we go through and why we might resist it and how different types of change can impact on the way that we react and respond to that. Which leads us to some strategies for helping us manage people through those change processes and a very brief look at some continuous improvement methods. So thank you very much for your time. I hope you have found that useful. My name is Sarah Brooks. I work for a small company called Aberdale Training, and if there are any other training needs that you have, please do get in touch. Really appreciate your time and good luck.